What's going on?
Hello.
Oh,
Hello,
man.
hello.
All right. Hello, and welcome to yet another 30 Minutes to Merge. If this is the first time you've joined us, welcome for the first time, I guess. And if you've returned again and again and again, welcome. And thanks for continuing to watch me struggle to get through these while I have awesome guests who kind of prop me up. Today, I'm super excited because I'm introducing Jason Epko as my guest. He is an awesome GitHubber. I've known Jason since he started at GitHub as an intern when he joined my team.
Good times.
Yeah, exactly. And then our paths kind of diverged. And then today I get to hang out with him with everyone else on the internet. So it's an exciting day for me. So really quickly, I just wanted to introduce Jason to the rest of the squad because you might not know him as well as I do. But when Jason isn't chopping down trees or mining stone in New World, he's also working on his cooking skills, and he predominantly likes to kind of mess around with curry, which is always a delicious meal. He is the owner of one amazing kitty cat named Mookie. And I always like to ask my guests what their most recent purchases, just because I like to show that we are still people and buy random things, not just fun tech stuff. And he recently bought an 8-inch frying pan to make it a little bit easier for himself to cook eggs at breakfast time, which maybe some of you can relate to.
I used it not 20 minutes ago. It was very helpful.
There it is. See, so that purchase came in handy. And then I always like to ask if there's like a fun action that these individuals that are joining my show would like to build. And so he's kind of actually in the process of working on one. He said that he's hesitantly building kind of actions as an arbitrary data layer. Yeah. So do you want to kind of dive into that just a little bit in terms of like what this fun little action is?
Yes. So it's been a hot minute since I've actually touched it, but I very hesitantly worked on a project called Action Record, which, if you're familiar with Ruby on Rails, the sort of primary ORM database communication stuff is called active records, so play on words. An action record is an attempt at making an API for using GitHub as a database via issues, but with the actual sort of ORM style model callbacks actually being run in GitHub Actions. And I want to make it very clear that it's a terrible idea. And it's sort of just a like, could it work? Is it useful? Really more of a just, could it work? And the answer is kind of.
All right. And then finally, I like to ask my guests if they're contributing to open source or if they'd like to be contributing more. And you said that you do maintain a couple of open source projects, kind of as requests start to filter in, you kind of like go back to those different open source projects that you are maintaining. Yep. And then outside of yours, or the ones that you're kind of maintaining, you do want to become more involved with open source outside of your projects. You just haven't necessarily found the right project and or found the motivation to really get up and running. So if Chad has any open source repos that you're looking for a contributor on, hit up Jason because he is fiending for an open source project to work on. And then there was a question in chat about if there's anything that they would be able to contribute in. We can share a link to all of the different repositories that Jason is maintaining. So if you wanted to kind of take a gander at what he's working on, like the actions as a data layer, or maybe some of the other actions that Jason is kind of known for, we can make sure that those are kind of shared so you can take a gander.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's a little different. Normally on 30 Minutes to Merge, we kind of cover like maybe a specific topic or maybe a specific task. But today we're going to actually kind of be talking about what Jason does at GitHub and the team that he works on. So yeah, so like maybe you could give us an introduction as to like your journey at GitHub and then what your current team is.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I started at GitHub as an intern about 4.5 years ago, which is kind of ridiculous to think about. I started on the sales services training team, so helping to build out websites and marketing material and stuff like that for our professional services team, who are, of course, consultants, kind of. They go to enterprises and really help them understand how to use GitHub, use it the best way that they can, integrate with all of their different tools and stuff. And then eventually I spun out into a new team to build something called GitHub Learning Lab, which is a sort of an automated training solution that happens within GitHub repositories. You can go and sign up. You say, I want to join this course. And then a bot creates a repository for you and sort of takes you along these guided steps so that you can learn how to use things like GitHub or issues or Markdown and sort of all of the things that encapsulate the experience of GitHub.com or GitHub Enterprise software development life cycles. And this bot kind of just like brings you along on the journey. So I worked on that for a good, 2-3 years. And then eventually I moved into a team called Special Projects. Special Projects is a fairly new team at GitHub. We sort of have two main areas. We work on paper cuts, so sort of low effort, high impact improvements that we can make across the product. So, somebody will write in and say, gee whiz, I hope I could store this setting, or I wish that this button were on the left instead of the right. That sort of lower level of paper cuts fixes that we can make, and then all the way up to some sort of more complicated things, which I can show you some examples of. We're kind of the team that does it all across the product. And part of why Special Projects exist is that there are areas of the product, like take GitHub issues, for example. There is a team that works on GitHub issues, and they're thinking about, the next 5 years of how people interact with issues on GitHub. They're thinking about, the biggest, best, amazing things that they can deliver to people that use GitHub, which means that they can't always prioritize the very sort of nitpicky fixes. So thankfully, that's what we get to help do. And then the other kind of work we do is these sort of larger explorations. A lot of it comes from somebody saying, hey, what if we did this thing? What if GitHub, what if GitHub had a mobile app? It does, but let's imagine that it didn't. That's the kind of prompt that our team would say, oh, what an interesting idea. Let's spend 6-ish weeks building out whatever kind of prototypes we can, doing a bunch of research, trying to understand the problem space, and just, spend some time finding a solution. And at the end of 6 weeks, we present a bunch of research, we present some prototypes, and then we sort of take it from there. If it's a good idea, we keep going. If it's not, we stop. And I can also show you some examples of when we've done that.
Perfect. I'm sure people are very curious what kind of exploratory things you've kind of dove into, and then what's come out of it. Really quickly, so I did want to bring up one question, because we do normally try to tackle a specific task or what someone might want to learn how to do with GitHub. So I thought it would be fun to just a really quick, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. If someone came to you and said, hey, I just found out about GitHub Actions, I want to write one. What would you tell that person? What are some areas that you would kind of provide with guidance, docs maybe? Essentially, what would you tell someone that was like, I want to make an action for the first time?
Yeah, totally. So that's a great question. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. The first thing I would say is make sure that you're understanding the ins and outs of whatever kind of automation tool you want to build, right? If you can sort of phrase it in a way that's, when this thing happens, I want this other thing to happen. If you can very clearly write out that statement for yourself, it's going to help you a lot, because then you can go from there and sort of say, what are the triggers? What information do I have in this context? And then what are the APIs, or what are the different services that I need to talk to be able to connect those two sides of that statement. And when it comes to GitHub Actions, that's usually what are the triggers that can trigger a GitHub action, and then what are the GitHub APIs that my action has access to. So I think you really need to spend a lot of time reading the documentation. Actions has great docs around which events it supports, and then the entire API reference documentation for the GitHub API is available. So that's the sort of like conceptual part of it. Then how do you actually approach building it? Well, there's really one way that I start thinking about building a GitHub Actions workflow. And that's first things first, I make a YAML file, and then I go to github.com/actions/github-script. So this is a GitHub action called GitHub script. I have it open. I don't know how to share my screen, but it's open on my screen. Yeah, thank you. So this is a GitHub action where basically you include it in your workflow YAML file, and you just sort of give it a string. You give it this script. And that string is just JavaScript with some sort of helper methods and helper variables that exist within the context of that script. So traditionally, actions, if you want to do something really complicated, if you want to write JavaScript for your action, if you want to make API calls and stuff like that, it's usually easier to like build an entire action as a repository. But for a lot of use cases, if all you want to do is like add a label to all new issues, or anytime an issue is closed, move it to the done column, right? Stuff like that, you can usually just get away with it in your workflow file directly using something like GitHub script. So if you can sort of keep it that simple, you save yourself a lot of trouble. Now, if that doesn't work, if what you're doing is more involved, you need dependencies, you need, I don't know, additional secrets, or some like larger, more complicated action with a bunch of files and stuff, then you have to have a proper GitHub action as a repository. I've seen a lot of folks create one repository for a bunch of different actions. Personally, I prefer to have multiple repos, one for each action. It helps as far as publishing them to the marketplace, making sure that they're all sort of well tested and well isolated, and including them properly in the workflow files. But I think the key thing is that as you're developing your GitHub action, there's a couple of SDKs and toolkits that you can use. There's an official one. So github.com/actions/toolkit.
Jason, while you're exploring, can you just zoom in just a little bit?
I absolutely can. How's that?
Thanks. Yep.
Yeah, so we have here the GitHub Actions Toolkit. So it's sort of an SDK for dealing with GitHub Actions within your JavaScript or TypeScript action. So it helps you manage things like getting the inputs that people provide to your action. So anybody who's using your action can provide some options or configurations or something like that to your action. It's really just sort of APIs to be more helpful as you're writing actions. I would never, ever want to write a JavaScript-based action without this. Okay. And then I also wrote one called also Actions Toolkit. And it's a more opinionated sort of alternative. It's more batteries included, which is both good and bad, depending on what you want. But yeah, you can also check that out. I also get a lot of questions about how you go about testing your GitHub action as you're building it. That's like a very common thing that people want to know about. And there's really two ways. Number one, as you're building it, you have a test repository, and you're actually triggering events on GitHub in your test repository, running the action every time and seeing what the output is. Very manual process, but also very expectable. And repositories are cheap. Just make a new repo every time you need to test a new action. It's okay. And then the other one is, personally, I lean very heavily into test-driven development when I build GitHub Actions, because the GitHub Actions environment in which my action will actually run, it includes things like environment variables. It includes things like the SDK for communicating with the GitHub API. And it's usually easier to just sort of have those as test fixtures. The documentation, like I said, for the API is really, really specific. They give you fixture payloads that you can even copy into your project, so that as you build it out, you're just sort of writing the tests as you go. And then you never actually have to run the action until you're done and you say, okay, I think all of my code is correct. All of my tests look reasonable and they pass. Now let me actually try it. That was a long rant, but I hope that made sense.
No, absolutely. You kind of took us from beginning to end, which is perfect. And hopefully people learned a little bit from it, or at least got some new repositories to kind of poke around in. I know I'll be looking at those actions toolkits once I'm not on this. So you did mention that your team's kind of shipped a couple of things, and you said that you wanted to share. And since you've got your screen already up, I figured we could kind of dive into some of the fun things that you've already built out.
Yes, I can. So, like I said, there's two sort of larger project work streams that we have. And I want to show one of the paper cuts type issues that we tackled. So we added support for citations on GitHub. And if you look at this UI here, you can see a repository with a citation.cff file. And now GitHub will pick up on that existence of that file, and it will include this little UI flyout menu here, where you can very easily copy the citation of this repository. So this is extremely valuable for folks who are trying to cite a repository as part of like an academic paper, or for students who are just submitting papers and they need to cite open source code or open source ideas and concepts. So this was one of those areas where we knew that people were going to be really happy about this, but when we released it, we just got an incredibly positive response. So we don't always know what people are going to love, which is why our team so heavily depends on listening to the community, getting ideas from everybody that uses GitHub, because everybody uses it differently. I have never tried to cite a repository, but the people that wrote in thanking us for this feature say this is going to make their work a million times easier, which is really amazing. And then aside from this is even like on the larger end of the paper cuts issues that we do. I think a favorite one that I have is, when you're writing an issue title and you do like backtick for markdown code in the issue title itself. Well, historically, you would do like, this thing, backtick some code, backtick, and it would just stay as backticks in the, in the GitHub UI. And that's fine, but that's not really what people intended, right? People wanted it to be rendered as code, right? Monospace with a little like gray background that you see everywhere on GitHub when you're typing monospace code. And so that's what we did. We made it work that way, and people were just like, oh, cool. Why didn't it always work that way? And there's usually lots of good reasons, and it was actually a little bit complicated to do just because of everywhere that issue titles are rendered. But it's one of those things where you look at it and it's just like, cool, this is good.
All right, so that's some smaller things. Do you have any more small ones that you want to share? Or well, small is the wrong word. I think the paper cut specific, like shorter sprint work, we'll say.
There's truly no end to them. We have a project board in which we list all of the various ones that we're tracking, and it's just massive and it grows every day. One that I shipped a long time ago actually was a button to when you're looking at a diff in a pull request or a commit, you have buttons to sort of show more of the diff up or down than the line that you're looking at, right? Because we only show a portion of the entire file that has changed. So I worked on adding a button to show the entire file with just one click instead of having to like click to show more, click to show more, click to show more. So that was, again, one of those things where like wasn't that hard to do, but made people's code review lives just a little bit easier.
Gotcha. Okay. I know I saw one, I think that was you're now able to use the auto link references via the API now, which I thought was fun. It's again probably like a small subset of users who are like, oh, finally. But I know that I've been kind of waiting for that to be available. So that was exciting to see as an option as well.
Yeah, that was also a really cool one. That's kind of a fun thing about how this team operates is, you know, we just talked about effectively 3 different features that span the entire GitHub product, right? They're not at all related to the things that we just talked about, which is just really interesting. You know, our team jumps into all of these problems or all of these, you know, product areas and just tries to make it a better experience. Speaking of better experiences, I want to talk about one of the larger projects that we worked on, which was this framework for building Open Graph images. So there's a blog post here that I think somebody will link in the chat. I don't actually know how to do that, but somebody will, in which we go over this project that we did to sort of make social link sharing a way, way better experience. So if we scroll down here, you see a very large picture of Nat Friedman. And this is what it used to look like when people shared an image, shared a link to a GitHub repository or a GitHub issue on a social media platform like Twitter or Facebook. It would just be like this giant image of the person's avatar. And that's not very exciting. So we took on this project to automatically generate images based on the link that was being shared. So in this example, you know, I would share a link to the NASA F Prime repository. We GitHub would automatically generate this really nice preview card image and include it in the actual card. So there should be, there's no example here, but these are like some of the images that we show. We have ones for commits, we have ones for pull requests and issues. And now instead of just sort of seeing, you know, dull, uninteresting text as you're scrolling through your Twitter feed, you'll see these really nice, rich images. And every time I scroll through Twitter, because I use Twitter a lot, I see more and more of these images, and it's just such a better experience. And I love telling the story of how our team took on this project. Nat Friedman, our CEO, said something along the lines of, "This kind of sucks. Can we make it better?" And we said, yeah, we can. So we did. So I would definitely recommend reading through this blog post. I'm also going to be giving a talk at GitHub Universe in which I go much more in depth around what Open Graph is, how it works, the different kinds of tags that we GitHub provide, and also how we built this service even in more detail than what's shown here.
Awesome. I think this is the most links I've had to submit to chat in a 30 minutes to merge session. So just if you aren't paying attention to chat, I just dumped like every repository, every blog post, and then a link to GitHub Universe that we've kind of talked about so far today. Interest of time, I know it's like a 30 minutes to merge and we're kind of cutting it close. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention about your team?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the segue. So yeah, my team is hiring. We're a group of, I don't know, 7, 8 kind of people, and we're looking to really grow the team. Our work has been really successful so far, and we just want to be able to do more of it. So we're hiring a senior software engineering manager, senior software engineers, and a senior product manager, I believe. So you can find all of those on github.com/about/careers. There's another link for you. And then if anybody has questions about the roles, you're welcome to find me on Twitter at JasonEtko. Happy to answer any questions I can over DMs as well. I look forward to hearing about it.
Just a question about internships. So for the internship piece, you can sometimes find the internship information on that same website for the GitHub careers page. There's a link directly for the internships and like how that process works. I used to be plugged into that a little bit more than I am now. I've been involved with the internship program from like a high level, just going to events if they were in the area. But since COVID, I haven't really been as involved with the internship program. But I know that we have one, and I know that we normally have a class that, you know, does really cool things. They ship cool products, and then, you know, sometimes they land a gig at GitHub, which is always a great thing. Really quick, so you said that you kind of look to make sure that the developers are having a better experience. What's the best way for developers to tell your team what could be improved on GitHub?
There's three preferred ways that we see customer feedback. On github.com/github/feedback. There's a bunch of discussion posts that you can leave all kinds of comments, thoughts, ideas. Those are really, really helpful, and we crawl through those all the time. You can also tweet at GitHub. We follow the Twitter accounts pretty closely. I see a lot of them on there, and if they're not already on our project board, we all just drop them there. It's extremely helpful. And then the last one is we follow customer support emails. When customers, you know, chime in and say, hey, we need this thing, we're missing this feature, this thing didn't work for us the way we expected to, we follow those. So all that said, if you have an idea, if you have a paper cut, if you have this thing that's just been bothering you, if you say it out into the world in any of those three places, or probably more, we will hear it, and we want to hear it, and we want to hear from you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to disappear on you. I'm just, again.
No, you're good. I keep giving you links. I understand.
And yeah. It's just like 9 different links for every like 4 words that you say. So my internet browser is just full of repositories and like the GitHub careers page now. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. Chat, we've got a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions for Jason about his team, the projects that they're working on, or anything else that you're curious about, we can hang out for a little bit. And if you don't have any questions now, you can always find us on the github.community site, which I'm sure will be linked on the stream for me, so I don't have to drop one more link, where we normally have conversations related to using GitHub, and also kind of where this kind of stream kind of started from, which was users having questions about how to use Git and GitHub, and Andrea suckering me into hosting this awesome event. So it's, you know, I think this is the 4th or 5th time I've done it. Still loving it every time. I'm learning a whole bunch about how to be a little bit better every time. So awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining, Jason. I appreciated being able to catch up with you in a professional and personal manner on this one.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks for all the work that your team's doing. It's great to, you know, have my work on GitHub be improved a little bit.
Happy to do it. It's very fun.
All right. Well, again, thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, whether it's morning, noon, or night. And we'll be catching you up next month. I think we have another, if I checked my calendar before I started this, I've got another 30 minutes to merge coming up next month. We'll be chit-chatting with another awesome Octocat, or maybe someone outside of GitHub, but probably not. And don't forget, GitHub Universe is coming, so make sure to sign up. And like Jason said, his team is hiring, my team is hiring, GitHub is hiring. So if you're interested, jump in and find a gig. I'm on Twitter at beardofedu. Jason is at JasonEtco. Feel free to reach out to either one of us if you have questions. Yeah, it's a great time to be a hubber.